Have you ever felt shame about your languages? Maybe you feel it right now. Maybe there's something that you feel really ashamed of that you can't do, or you haven't done, or you don't think you'll ever be able to do. There's so many reasons that we can feel ashamed of our language learning or about our language learning, and we just don't talk about it enough. So in this video, we're going to talk about shame and language learning and how it all connects, how it might show up, and I have a little something to share with you as well if this is something that you feel very much relates to where you're at right now with your languages. So first up then, we'll talk more about it at the end, but that thing that will be useful if this is connected to you, this idea of shame, come and join me at Grace and Space. Grace and Space is a language event that is designed for the language learner who wants to do better, but kind of is overwhelmed and shamed often by the hustle and the hack chat of language learning. So join me at Grace and Space. The link is in the description to get your ticket. This isn't a live event this year. This is a chance to have your ticket and just enjoy it on your terms. And yeah, I'll share more on it about the end. First up then, we need to define what shame is. And not just to do with languages, shame is one of those emotions that we just don't talk about a lot in general. We all have it, unless we lack the capacity for empathy, which, I kind of hope you don't. And yet we don't like to open up and to talk about it. But when we do talk about shame, we actually release the control that it has over us. So what is it? Well, first up, in the words of mastered shame researcher Dr. Brené Brown, shame is I am bad versus guilt being I did something bad. So shame is much more of a deeper feeling, a much more personal feeling about who you are as a person than just this one-time thing that you might feel guilty for. And from that alone, we can see that shame can become something huge and encompassing if we allow it and we let it in. And if we add embarrassment into that mix of shame versus guilt versus embarrassment, we might see the two as something a little bit different here too. So shame being this feeling of defectiveness to your core personal self of who you are as a person, and embarrassment being that defective feeling in relation to our current self. For example, we might feel embarrassed in a one-off speaking scenario where we mess up a word and say something slightly wrong. On the other hand, we might feel shame on a more consistent basis. We aren't fluent yet and we always feel that. Shame isn't exactly an emotion that leads to positive change. It doesn't make us more confident to speak and use a language. It doesn't make us learn better. It's just meh. But like I say, we don't talk about it enough. So that's what we're going to do today. What causes shame for language learners? Now, according to a study on the role of shame in language learning from Nottingham University, sources of language shame come into two categories. There's learner internal factors and learner external factors. We'll start with the internal factors and see if there's anything that resonates here with you. So first up then, personality characteristics. It might be that you are typically more prone to shame and it appears for you as more of a personality trait almost than a temporary passing thing. You may constantly be on the lookout for potential sources of shame. For example, if you sign up to a language evening class and the first couple of sessions, the vibe is a little bit judgy, well, you might be prone to then just not go back to avoid feeling ashamed when you attempt to speak. The next potential source for shame for language learners is pronunciation and accent related issues. Now this one breaks my heart because I just wish that we could live in a world, and I know I'm going to sound like the Mean Girls, rainbows and butterflies and cake, and I know I'm going to sound like that. But I wish that we could live in a world where we did not judge people by their accent. I wish that we all had more patience and empathy and kindness when it comes to different accents. But equally, I'm not stupid. I know that accent bias is just so deep-rooted sometimes and often unintentional, has to be said, that this isn't something we can overcome easily. And that also means that it is likely to be a big source of shame for people. Poor vocabulary and grammatical inaccuracy. So it might seem like all we need to do here is learn more words, do more grammar drills. No. Because we have this apparently easy response to this source of shame, it's a really easy shame spiral to fall down into. So we think, oh, I struggle with vocab, I struggle with grammar. But the answer is easy: learn more words, do more grammar. And then we tell ourselves, if I was good at this, I would do more vocab. If I was good at learning languages, I would understand this grammar. And we then tell ourselves, you should be ashamed of this because you can't do it. How embarrassing. But the truth is that just mind-numbingly trying to drill a language into your brain typically does not work. Language learning needs a little bit more kindness, a little bit more consideration of everything happening in your life to be better successful than just drill, 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 can't remember. So no, it's not your fault. None of this is. It's just shame talking. The next potential source of shame on the list from this study is an interesting one. Failure to produce a positive image of oneself in others' minds. Now that's a lot of words. Let's just slow that down. When we express ourselves in another language, it is the ultimate act of vulnerability, because we are putting ourselves in a position where we know we cannot fully express ourselves to the point that we want to, yet we're doing it anyway. But then because we aren't fully ourselves, because we don't yet have that language to do so, we can end up feeling pretty shamed about how we maybe came across. We tell ourselves that we must have come across really weirdly or badly, or like a child who can't find the words, or just like someone who has nothing of interest to say. And then that leads to us feeling ashamed that we haven't created this positive image for other people of ourselves because we couldn't express ourselves well enough. And this "what will they think of me" question can be a huge source of language learner shame. Fear of failure. So you know I love me some language mistakes, right? Yeah. But you probably also know that it's not always easy to make them and still feel confident and comfortable with your language ability. And that is a fear of failure talking. And when we feel a fear of failure, it's easier and safer to just not try. So we avoid attempting to use the language, avoid making mistakes, and just let shame guide us. And as for those two learner external factors, there's just two listed in the study. The first one is corrective feedback, assessment, and treatment of errors. How many times have you worked with a teacher who makes you feel so small and ashamed when they correct your work and your attempts at the language? When I was teaching English and French and Spanish, one of the first questions that I would have lined up when I started working with a new student was this: how do you like to be corrected? Most people would be quite taken aback by this because they've often not been asked this before. A teacher has just started to work with them and gone with their way of working and their way of correcting, and that might not always work for every student. So I would always make sure that I asked people how they would prefer to be corrected. And after they paused for a minute and I sort of explained a bit further, do you want me to interrupt and correct every single tiny mistake? Do you want me to correct those tiny mistakes but save them for the end of that chunk of conversation? Or would you like me to ignore every teeny tiny mistake and focus on the big ones that affect your meaning and being understood, and then correct them at the end? Most people opted for that final choice because what people want when they want to practice a language, we just want to speak, to have that space to practice and be heard and have someone there who can guide us and realign us when we go really off course. We're not that worried in the early stages about every single teeny tiny mistake. And unfortunately, some teachers, I've had it too when I've worked with people, they are worried about that, and they do correct everything, and it can make you feel this big. And when that happens and that makes you feel ashamed of your language ability, it affects the way that you show up. You attempt to say less, and you attempt to just stick to what you know, not to try a new language, not to test out some new vocab that you've been learning that week, but instead to just hold back and stay using the safe language that you know you can get right at this point. And obviously, if we're not using new language, we're not going to be advancing in that language. We're just stagnating. And the final external factor here is reflected appraisal and teacher beliefs. So if the people involved with your language learning, whether it is a teacher or an exchange partner or simply someone that you know, like, love, that is involved, that knows that language, if they share their thoughts with you about your ability, and it's not necessarily a positive opinion, you then begin to reflect that. You absorb that belief because they know the language better than you, so therefore they must know what they're talking about more than you do. Let's say that your teacher casually mentions one day, for someone not that gifted at languages, you're okay. It's kind of supposed to be a compliment, but they've just said that you're not gifted at languages. So now you know in your head, in the back of your brain, every single time you try and use this language, that your teacher thinks you're not gifted at languages. That kind of sucks. And it can be a huge source of shame. Of course, for some of us, these kinds of words can act as a huge motivator, almost like fuel for the fire. And we're like, you think I'm not gifted at languages? Yeah, I'll show you. But even then, we're still responding based on perhaps that hidden shame that we've decided to bulldoze over with this faux confidence. So even then, we're still reflecting those beliefs of others, and it can still be a source of shame. So if you're wondering after all this how you can move past shame, come and join me at this year's Grace and Space. I'll be sharing 4 new trainings with you on the topics of expectations, seasons, shame, and distractions. All things that have been coming up a lot recently when I've been talking both to people I work with and everyone else. If you've never attended Grace and Space before, it's an online event for language learners, probably like you, who want to do better but are bored and tired of the hackification of language learning. It's a language event that I want you to go back to your language learning after with a new, refreshed, invigorating feeling rather than a feeling of stress and overwhelm of all of the things that you've just learned that you now have to apply. This year's event is completely online, but not live. So you will get access to all the sessions from day one of the event. And from that whole week, you'll get access to a live asynchronous group chat with me. This happens on a tool called Voxer, where it's kind of like WhatsApp. So we can share text, voice notes, images, links, all of that stuff, but without the distraction of a million different group chats. And all of this, those 4 brand new sessions and that whole week of support with me is just $35 with your Grace and Space ticket. So get your ticket now. The link is in the description and I will see you very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much. Bye.